Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to the channel, and I am here for a discography ranking video for you guys. Now for this ranking, I'll be ranking the Dream Theater discography. This is a ranking I've always wanted to do, so I'm finally glad I'm here doing this ranking. Now, Dream Theater has a lot of albums, and this ranking was not easy to do. There's a lot of placements in my ranking that could subject to change, I guess. Specifically with some albums I have, towards the middle. And I know that my ranking might, stir a few people up, but yeah, because I do have a few unpopular opinions when it comes to Dream Theater. So yeah, Dream Theater, definitely a great band. I've been a fan of them since 2018. One of my good subscribers have recommended their album Awake to me. I checked it out and really liked it. So yeah, and the rest is history. I mean, so we're gonna go from worst to best. If you agree with this ranking, cool. If you don't, that's okay too. And keep in mind, with the bottom three, I don't have in my collection yet, but I plan on getting the bottom three from my collection at some point. I would like to collect all of Dream Theater's albums at some point. So we're gonna go ahead and start off with the weakest in my opinion, which is The Astonishing. This album is pretty boring, repetitive, and I think a lot of people can agree that it is their weakest. Is it a terrible album? No, but it's just kind of on the forgettable side. Nothing really special about it. Next up, we got their debut album, When Dream and Day Unite. Now, if you are someone that likes 80s progressive metal, I think you would really dig this album. If you like Queensryche, I think you would really like this album. This is when they had a different vocalist before James LaBrie came into the band. Yeah, not one of their best, but I think it's a decent album. And then we got the self-titled album. Now, the reason that this is closer to the bottom for me is mainly just due to replay value, and it's honestly kind of a forgettable album for the most part. Not a terrible album, but just, lacks memorable tracks, I think. Not really much that I personally remember from the album. So yeah, now next up, we actually got the albums that I do have in my collection. So next up, we got Systematic Chaos. This is a decent album. This album, again, kind of like the self-titled album, has like that boring aspect to it, kind of forgettable aspect of it, I think. There is some good stuff on here, like Constant Motion, The Dark Eternal Night, Persistence of Enemies, Part 1 and 2. I mean, these are good songs, I think, but yeah, not one of their best, but I still think it's a good album for what it is. This next one that I have in my ranking can definitely see some people maybe disagreeing with, but next up we got Octavarium. Overrated album in my opinion. I never understood the hype with this album. Sure, it's a good album, but I don't think it's one of their best, like a lot of people claim it to be, I just think that Dream Theater has done way better than this, personally. This album does have some good songs on it. The Root of All Evil, Panic Attack, I Walk Beside You, and the title track. Now the title track, it's a good song, but I think it's incredibly overhyped. It's an overhyped track. I just think this song really overstays its welcome. It's like 24 minutes long. Now, I usually don't have a problem with long songs, but when a song drags on like this one, it can become a little much, I think. One example I can think of when it comes to this is Iron Maiden with the Book of Souls album with their closing track, Empire of the Clouds. That's another song, another long song that I think is really overhyped. For me personally, I'm just not the biggest fan of longer songs like that, but it is a good song though, and I do like it for the most part. The title track to Octavarium. Yeah, good album, just again, not one of their best in my opinion. Next up, we got Black Clouds and Silver Linings. Might get some flack for putting this album above Octavarium, but it is what it is. I just enjoy, you know, what I hear from this album just more. I mean, this album is just really good. You got songs like A Nightmare to Remember and Wither. These are great songs, some fan favorites, of course. But yeah, very good album. Kind of overlooked in a way, too. I mean, I think this album is slightly underrated. Again, not one of their best, but it's definitely a good album. Next up, we got A Dramatic Turn of Events. Definitely a good album. Again, like the others I mentioned, not one of their best, but that's not saying much because it's still a very good album. I mean, you got songs like On the Back of Angels, Build Me Up, Break Me Down, This Is the Life, Beneath the Surface. These are great songs, but yeah, Dramatic Turn of Events, really a good album for sure. Next up, we actually got their latest album, Distance Over Time. One of my favorite albums of last year. Now, there was a period of time where this album wasn't really doing that well with replay value. Like, I think the problem with this album was it came out in a year where, you know, it was just overloaded with great albums, because 2019 was a great year for music. I mean, you had albums from Queensryche, and then you had, you know, some metalcore bands come out with albums. So this album kind of, you know, got caught in that mix, like, and I think that's why it doesn't really have the strongest replay value. Like, I think if this album would have came out like this year instead, you know, now in a time where, you know, new releases aren't really that great, I think that this album would have actually had more impact if this album would have came out this year instead. But it is what it is. I mean, I think that this is a great album nonetheless. I have been going back to certain songs on the album, like S2N. That song has grown up to be one of my favorites on the album. Now, when the album came out, it was never one of my favorites, but it's grown up to be one of my favorites now. But some of my other favorites would be Fall Into the Light, which is my favorite of the singles, Barstool Warrior, and Pale Blue Dot. These are great songs, but yeah. This album, I think, kind of has it all. I mean, there's a lot of variety to this album, I think. And definitely the best of their 2010s material. But yeah, if you haven't checked out this album yet, please check it out. Next up, we got Falling Into Infinity. I know, this album definitely doesn't deserve to be up there, you know, above, you know, Distance Over Time or Octavarium or Black Clouds and Silver Linings, you know what I'm saying? But I don't know. I really dig this album. This album is kind of overhated, in my opinion. I think it's a great album, though. I mean, I think the reason that some people don't like it is because it is a little different for Dream Theater. It's more progressive rock than it is progressive metal. But the thing is, what's wrong with progressive rock? I mean, that's one thing I have to point out. I mean, you know, you clearly have not listened to Rush. I mean, I don't know, but this is still a great album, though. I mean, it's definitely great. New Millennium, excellent song. I think it's maybe one of their best opening tracks. I really dig it, though. You Not Me is a little commercial. I kind of like it, though. And then you got Burning My Soul and Trial of Tears, which are also great tracks. But yeah, Falling Into Infinity, again, some people might disagree with it where it is on my ranking, but that's okay. I think it's a great album, though. Next up, we got A Train of Thought. This is a great album. I mean, this was actually one of the first Dream Theater albums that I've heard, and yeah, I think it's a great album for sure. Really, I don't think you can go wrong with any of the songs on this album. Now, sure, some songs are better than others, but I mean, you got As I Am, This Dying Soul, Endless Sacrifice, and so many others. But yeah, Train of Thought, probably their heaviest album. If you like heavy Dream Theater, you're gonna dig this album. So Train of Thought, great album. Now, next up, I know some people would personally put this up there in their top 3, but for me, it's number 4. But next up, we got 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. Again, some people would put this in the top 3, and some people would even place it as their best album, but I personally wouldn't do that. It's a great album, sure, but I don't think it's their best work. There's a lot of great songs on here, I think, like The Glass Prison, Blind Faith, Misunderstood, The Great Debate, About to Crash. I think these are great tracks. The first disc is definitely better than the second disc. Obviously, this is a double album, and that is usually the case with any double album. It is usually the first disc that is just usually stronger than the second one. But yeah, definitely a great album. Next up, we got Metropolis Part 2, Scenes from a Memory. Definitely a solid album. I mean, you got a lot of great songs on here, like Strange Deja Vu, Dance of Eternity, Home, Spirit Carries On. Yeah, definitely a great album. I mean, it's a concept album. I've seen some people say that this is the best Dream Theater album, but for me, it's just number 3. Definitely a great album, though. Kind of overrated in my opinion, but yeah, considering that there's a lot of people that say that this is number 1, but I personally wouldn't do that. Still a great album, though. Definitely worth checking out. So at number 2, we got Awake. Now again, this was my first Dream Theater album, so maybe the reason it's really high up there is because it's my first Dream Theater record, but I think a lot of people would agree that this is one of their best. This is also one of their heavier albums. It's one of their more raw sounding albums, which might turn some people off, but I don't know. I really dig this album. I mean, those, the first 3 songs are excellent. You got 6 O'Clock, Caught in a Web, and Innocence Faded, which is underrated. And you also got other great songs like Voices, The Mirror, and Lie. These are great songs, but yeah, just about every song on here I think is great. I mean, if you're a progressive metal fan, haven't checked out this album yet, please check it out. If you're new to Dream Theater, I'd say check out this album. So Awake, it's really high up there, and it's number 2 in my ranking. Now, number 2 and number 1 do go back and forth sometimes, but I have to place this album at number 1 since this is probably the Dream Theater album that I go back to the most. And there's no other way around it. I think it's their best album. So at number 1, we got Images and Words. Definitely a classic. It's the first album with James LaBrie. I think this album is just absolutely fantastic. I mean, this is a must listen for any progressive metal fan and progressive music fans in general. Definitely check out this album. It's definitely excellent. I mean, you got great songs on here. Like, just about every song on here I think is excellent. You got Pull Me Under, Another Day, Take the Time, Surrounded, Metropolis Part 1, Under a Glass Moon, Wait for Sleep, and Learning to Live. Basically named all the tracks. They're all excellent. They're all great songs. And Learning to Live actually might be my favorite closing track from Dream Theater. I think that song is excellent and probably one of my favorite Dream Theater songs. Pull Me Under, I think, is also one of their best album openers. And yeah, this has some of their best work on it. So yeah, Images and Words, it's number 1 for me. And it's my favorite Dream Theater album. Well, there you have it, guys. That is my ranking for the Dream Theater albums. Let me know what you guys think. How would you rank their discography? Feel free to let me know. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day and take care.